When I first started playing guitar, I would hear guys mention chord names like A7 or C sharp diminished or E major 9, and I had no clue what they were talking about. What? You might try to explain things to me and say something like a power chord is just a 1 and a 5, or major chords have a major third and minor chords have a minor third, and I would be totally lost and think to myself, a third? The 1, the 5, what are they talking about? It wasn't until I understood intervals, scale degrees, and the basic rules of chord construction that I was able to wrap my head around how chords are built and named, which chords sound best together, and how my favorite songs worked. Learning the intervals will allow you to see patterns on the fretboard, understand scales, outline the chords of your song, and easily find your target notes when soloing and improvising. I want to make it very clear in the beginning that you do not have to memorize the location of every note on the fretboard to be able to do this, but you do need to know the musical alphabet and be able to figure out what any note on the fretboard is. If you don't know how to do that, I'd recommend watching this video. I can't overstate the importance of intervals and scale degrees. In this video, I hope to help you understand why. And just remember, as we're learning these things, that my ultimate goal with this channel is to encourage and foster great songwriting in you. So let's not lose the forest for the trees. The last thing I want to do is create a bunch of annoying music theory nerds. The theory is not the end goal. It is a means to the end goal of writing great songs, moving songs, beautiful songs. With that being said, let's get started. A note on its own is barely alive. Just like we don't want stagnant, unmoving water to drink, we don't want a stagnant, unmoving note to listen to because it doesn't give us a story. It doesn't move the listener because it itself does not move. It's like having a character in a movie that doesn't do anything. It would be pointless to us. No one would produce that movie because no one would watch that movie. But when the note moves somewhere, we have relationship, life, emotion. What is the most basic observation we can make about something that lives? I would say it's that it moves. Movement indicates life, and life is the most beautiful thing that exists. The essence of God Himself is life. The purpose of life is to live, to move, to do. If you came upon somebody lying on the ground and you wondered are they dead or alive, you would look for movement. You would look to see if their chest is moving as they breathe. You would put your fingers on their neck to see if they had a pulse. You're searching for movement. You might listen to hear if they're breathing. It's sound indicating movement. When something moves, we can better understand it if we measure that movement. And if we want to measure something, we need a standard unit of measurement with which to measure it. For instance, if we want to measure weight, we use pounds or kilograms. For length, we might use inches or meters. In music, we need to measure the distance, so to speak, between two notes. And for that, we use units of measurement called intervals. And since there are only 12 notes used in the 12-tone equal temperament system that underlies the vast majority of Western music, we pay special attention to measuring that 12-note span, which we call an octave. In fact, that is our most basic and foundational interval because within the span of an octave, we have all of the other notes. So simply put, an interval describes the musical distance between two notes, and we can play those two notes a couple of different ways. Melodically, which means in succession or one after the other, like this. Or harmonically, which means we play them at the same time, like this. The smallest interval on guitar or piano is called a half step, which some people call a semitone. On the guitar, we play a half step on two adjacent frets, ascending like this, or descending like this. A distance of two half steps is called a whole step, also known as a tone. On the guitar, we play a whole step by skipping a single fret, ascending like this, or descending like this. We could keep going up one half step at a time to describe each possible interval, but as we get into larger intervals, It's easier to name them by number and or quality than by trying to count or remember how many half steps are between the two, just like we wouldn't use inches to measure the distance between New York and LA when we could use miles. So for that, we have a naming system that involves two variables, number and quality. For numbering intervals, we use words like unison, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. And for quality, we use words like perfect, imperfect, major, minor, augmented, diminished. Unisons, fourths, fifths, and octaves, or eighths, are called perfect intervals. And the remaining intervals, seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths, are considered imperfect. Each of the imperfect intervals have two versions, which are called either major or minor, depending on their size. So we can have either a major or minor second, a major or minor third, a major or minor sixth, or a major or minor seventh. We use the word augmented to describe an interval that is 1/2 step larger than a perfect or major interval, and we use the word diminished to describe an interval that is 1/2 step lower than a perfect or minor interval. We also use the word sharp to describe raising a note by a half step, and flat to describe lowering it by a half step. This chart shows all the intervals within an octave. I know it probably looks like a lot of complex information if you've never seen it, but it's really pretty simple once you get the hang of it. Knowing how these intervals both appear on the fretboard and feel under your fingers is what we're trying to accomplish here. So let's go over how each one looks on the fretboard so that you can picture them easily when you're playing. Remember, intervals are a stepping stone on our way to learning scale degrees, which are very similar but not entirely the same. Learning to think in terms of scale degrees will make you a much better songwriter, but to do that we need to first understand intervals. One by one, I'm going to go through each interval by name, then I'll play the interval both melodically and harmonically so that you can both hear and see them on the fretboard. And I'll explain a little bit about how it sounds to me. I encourage you to play along on your instrument. Also, remember that we're going over the most foundational information, but like many things, there are exceptions to the rules that I'm about to tell you, and you'll learn those as you progress in learning music theory. Consonance and dissonance. Much of life involves a play of opposites. Light and dark, male and female, up and down, hot and cold. The first verse in the Bible is, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." We see opposites everywhere, all around us. Music, too, involves an interplay of opposites. And one of those pairs of opposites is consonance and dissonance. Consonant sounds or intervals are pleasant to the ear. They are agreeable and easy to enjoy because they are made with simple ratios like 1:1 for a unison, 2:1 for an octave, 3:2 for a perfect fifth, and 4:3 for a perfect fourth. Dissonant intervals are harsh to the ear. The tritone, some people call it the devil's interval, minor second, and major seventh are strong dissonant intervals. And just a side note, the ratios I just gave you, besides the unison and the octave, those ratios refer to just intonation as opposed to equal temperament intonation that we use on our instruments. Equal temperament approximates these ratios but does not meet them precisely because it would be hard to play in multiple keys with other instruments aligning together. The unison is the most consonant interval, and it's very restful. So a unison has a ratio of 1:1, and I'll demonstrate it using the A note on the 5th fret and the open A string, which is your 5th string here. I may not be tuned perfectly, but those notes should sound very similar. So played in succession, they sound like that. Played harmonically, or at the same time, they sound like. And you can tell that they vibrate very close to exactly the same. That's because they are the same note. So that's the most consonant interval you can have, is playing the same note. On piano, you can't play the same note anywhere. You can only do that, well, I say only. You can do it on guitar and other stringed instruments, but you can't do it on piano because there is no same note. There is no exact same note. In scientific pitch notation, for instance, this is, I believe, that would be A2. So this is A2, and this is A2. The guitar has multiple places to play that same A. The piano will only have one A2 on it that vibrates it. I believe that's 110 hertz. So that's one difference in the guitar and the piano. So the unison is the most harmonious interval there is, and that's pretty obvious why that is. It's because you're playing the same exact note. While we're on this subject, if you're ever in a situation where you're without a tuner and just need to make your guitar be in tune with itself, this is a way to do that. Just estimate the sound of the low E as best you can. Then put your finger on the 5th fret and hit that note, and then hit the open string below it. And tune up or down until they sound like they just did, till they sound the same. Because our guitars, if we're in standard tuning, they are tuned to fourths. Every string is tuned to a fourth until we get to the B string, which is tuned to a major third, which is a half step lower than a fourth, which we'll go over in this video. But anyway, so if you didn't know how to tune your guitar, that's how you do it. So just remember, when you get down to the G string, put your finger on the 4th fret here. And then when you go back to tune the E using the B string here, you put your finger back on the 5th fret, like you had it for all the others. Next, I want to go over the perfect eighth, also called the octave. It has a ratio of 2 to 1, and that's because, so if this is A110, this octave is vibrating exactly twice as fast. It should sound pretty consonant, very consonant. So they're vibrating together. They're so consonant you can barely tell them apart. They are not dissonant at all. So besides the interval of a unison, which is just the same note at the same pitch, or a 1-to-1 ratio, the most fundamental and basic interval in music is the octave, or perfect eighth, which is simply a doubling of pitch that we can represent with a simple ratio of 2 to 1. It's also the same note, but it's not the same pitch because the pitch is doubled. So the same note, but it's a different pitch. That's where that hertz, that frequency measurement, so 110 hertz, this would be 220. This would be 440. 110, 220, 440. Okay, so each time you go up an octave, it doubles. The next one would be 880. There. And I think we ran out of A's. Anyway. So I forgot to do memory things for all this, but just off the top of my head, a lot of people might not know the old Wizard of Oz movie, but if you do, when she sings the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and she goes, somewhere over, that somewhere, those first two notes, that's an octave. All of the other notes are contained inside any octave. So within these two A's, we have, from here, I'm going to put it on one string. In fact, let's do it with the E string. E, E. It's that same octave pattern. So we're going to use that one up there, though, so I can show you along here. You would have E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. And you can just keep going. Now, you could have started that from anywhere. If you had started it from F, if you started it here, we'd end on this F. All the notes are there. There's only 12 notes in all of Western music. Like I said, the difference is the pitch of the note. So this E, I don't remember what it vibrates at. I think it might be like 82 hertz or something like that. So this will be whatever 82 times 2 is. What is that, 164? Don't laugh at my math skills. So anyway, whatever it is, it vibrates it twice as fast. I think it's not oscillate. What is it called? Cycles. I think they call it cycles. So it cycles at twice as much, twice as fast. Hertz is cycles per second. So, and all it is like a sine wave, like when you were in algebra class. It's just, it goes up. You've got your little equator type deal here. It goes above it. And it's like the two halves of a circle. Anyway, so that's why the octave is exceedingly important, because that's what we're dividing. That's the main thing we're dividing up. When we make a scale, well, we're just dividing up that octave. And there's 12 notes in the octave, but we only want certain ones. So most of our scales are, well, our major scales are heptatonic scales. That means 7 notes. And our minor scales will be heptatonic scales. So most of our full scales will be, and the pentatonics are included in those notes. So there's 5 notes, and then you add a couple more, and you'll have your major scale. 5 notes in your pentatonic. Anyway, I've gone over this in other videos. You can watch those if you want to see that. And so an octave is the same ascending or descending. So you have your E, and then I ascend to this E. Okay? And then if I started at this E, I descend the same amount of notes to get to that E. All right, seconds. So major and minor seconds. Minor second has a ratio of 16 to 15. As you can imagine, that's very harsh. That's very not smooth, and it's dissonant. And the major second has a ratio of 9 to 8. Seconds are the smallest interval that we use to measure distance on the guitar. We went over them at the very beginning of the video, but there we called them by their other names, half step and whole step. So a minor second is a half step, and a major second is a whole step. Okay? And it's the smallest, a minor second is the smallest interval you can go. So from the open E, if we ascend to the F, that's a minor second. And it's also the theme from Jaws. If you remember that movie, you probably don't. But, and then we could descend. So notice that now when we descend, it's different. This is the difference in intervals and scale degrees. The major difference in intervals and scale degrees is that intervals start from any note to any other note, and scale degrees are relative to a tonic note, a key center. So whatever key we're in, that's our main note, and everything else is relative to that. A major second can also be called a natural second, or just a second. It depends on the context and who you're talking to, how they're going to talk about it. If we were in the Phrygian mode, anyway, if we're in Phrygian, if you know we're in Phrygian and I know we're in Phrygian, then we both know what that means, and we know that the second note in Phrygian is a minor second, as opposed to in every other mode of the major scale, except for Locrian, which we are probably not going to be in that. So if I mentioned the second degree while we're playing something in Phrygian, you would know that I mean that flat second. But normally when someone says a second, they will mean a major second. So an ascending major second would be from E to F sharp, and then the descending major second would be from E to D. Thirds. A minor third has a ratio of 6 to 5. It's pretty consonant. It can come off as dark or sad. So this is what a minor third sounds like. This is what a major third sounds like. It has a ratio of 5-4. It's consonant, stable, pleasing, strong, happy. Those are the kind of words you'll probably associate with it. We make chords with thirds. So chords are just stacked thirds. We're going to go over this in chord construction later, but thirds are super important. Thirds are also the notes in your scales you're going to be targeting all the time, because when you're speaking in terms of a chord or scale, the third is the gender of the chord. I think of, a major would be male and minor would be female. But it's just like when a baby is born, the first distinction you can make is whether the child is male or female. So too with chords, we can ask, is it a major or a minor? This is what the third tells us if we're speaking in terms of chords. And then you can play with the third and do interesting things like blues. When you hear a... Anyway, that's going from the minor third to the major third. You're blending major and minor at that point, and it becomes really interesting. But anyway, thirds are very important. Then this is a minor third from E to G. And this is a major third from E to G sharp. A descending minor third is to C sharp. And a descending major third would be from E to C, or C natural. On guitar, thirds are used all the time in country, just like their cousins, sixths. The sixth is an inverted third and vice versa. So think Brown Eyed Girl when it's Van Morrison, when he's like... I didn't play that very well, but who cares? You know what I'm talking about. So those are thirds. That's a major third, minor third. Perfect fourths ratio is 4 to 3. It's very consonant. It's a perfect interval. This one will naturally be familiar to guitarists because our instrument, with the exception of the B string, as we went over earlier, is tuned to fourths when we are in standard tuning. So anytime you have your E, you can hit that A and you know it's a fourth. If you hit the A, you can hit the note below it, or above it technically, and it's a D, that's a fourth. So A to D, if you go D to G, that's a fourth. Also, if you divide an octave into two parts at the fourth or the fifth, they're inverted. Just like the thirds and sixths are inverse of each other, the fourth and fifth are inverted. So if we take this and we cut it at the fifth, the distance between there and there is a fifth, but the distance between here is a fourth. If we cut it off at the fourth from the open string, now we've got a fourth from here to here, and from here to here we have a fifth. So something to keep in mind, all of these invert like that. The only balanced ones are the octave or the perfect eighth, and the next one we're going to do now, the augmented fourth or diminished fifth. Also called the devil's interval. Dabalus in Musica is what it was called at some point in history. It's very dissonant. The ratio for it is 45 to 32. So that's a really odd ratio. That's not a comfortable, easy ratio at all. So, and it sounds like... It's very unrestful. That would make you, like if you were sleeping and I just moved down to the fourth and I went... That should be pretty peaceful sounding to you. But if I went... You'd probably have nightmares if you were hearing that at night. It is a dark sounding... I don't know. It feels very metal to me. And I think of that. I think of metal music, but it's also in the blues. You'll play that's that note. Anyway, that's the augmented fourth or the diminished fifth, and it is like the octave in that it's kind of the inverse. The octave is like, besides a unison, the most consonant, and it's balanced, right? So if we start from the open E, go up 12 half steps, we end up here. If we start from this E and go down 12 half steps, we have the octave. So that's balanced in that way. To whereas the thirds were inverted to be sixths, right? The minor third equals a major sixth on the other side, and the major third equals a minor sixth on the other side. The perfect fourth inverted is a perfect fifth, okay? But the augmented fourth or the diminished fifth is right in the middle. So it's balanced on both sides, but unlike the octave, it's harsh sounding. Jimi Hendrix. Anyway, I think he starts off that song with some diminished fifths or augmented fourths or something like that. I think he plays something like that. It sounds really harsh, but it gets your attention. It's part of the reason that song is so cool. But he starts off with a lot of dissonance, and then he goes into the consonant. All right, so the perfect fifth. The perfect fifth has a ratio of 3:2. Like its inverse, the perfect fourth, it's very consonant. So and it's a power chord. So at the beginning of the thing, I said, people will talk about the 1 and the 5. Well, when they say the 1 and the 5, they're talking about chord tones, but it's the fifth. It's a fifth away, ascending. And lots of great songs written with just power chords. Lots of pop punk songs, metal songs, rock songs. So it's just the 1 and the 5. And the fifth is very harmonious. Every mode of the major scale has a perfect fifth except for Locrian, which is very dissonant. But all the major modes, all three of them, and all three of the minor modes of the major scale have a perfect fifth. So if we go from here, the fifth is on B. And if we start from here and go down a fifth, we land on the A, because it's just a certain number of half steps. So you refer to the chart and you can look at the half steps, but it's just easier to know what a fifth is. That's why I'm showing you this on the fretboard. And again, I don't want to spend all day on these. I want to get to the scale degrees because, like I said, they're very similar, but they're different. And scale degrees is how I want you to think, because it's going to change everything for you. And it's just going to open up the instrument for you. All right, so 6, there's a minor 6 and a major 6. The minor 6 ratio is 8:5. It's consonant. It's slightly dark or sad. The major 6 ratio is a 5:3, and it's consonant, but it's happy and bright. So a sixth, you'll see these a lot in country. Like I said, they're the other side of those thirds. But Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival is a popular, the beginning of the song. Anyway, but it starts on that. Those are sixth. So a minor sixth has 8 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And a major 6 has 9. So a minor 6 would be from E to C. Remember, the 6 and thirds are inverted. So when we went from E to C before, that was a major third distance, descending. But ascending from E, we would get a minor 6th. And if we ascend and get a major 6, we get the opposite, the minor third. from there to there. So those are 6. Also, if you want to learn chicken picking and you want to pick the first note with your pick and the second note with like your middle finger or your ring finger. Anyway, it's a lot of country stuff. Guys use those a lot, and it's good practice to do the chicken picking deal, hybrid picking, with using your pick and your fingers. The sevenths, you got a minor 7, which has a ratio of 16:9. It's dissonant and unresolved, 10 half steps. And a major 7th, 15:8 ratio, and it's also dissonant and unresolved, and it's 11 half steps. So these are the inverse of the seconds. So the minor 7 is kind of the other side of a major second, and a major 7th is the other side of a minor second. So if we ascend 11 half steps, because 12 gets us all the way back from E to E. So if we only go 11, that's a major 7th. For some reason, I find this interval incredibly beautiful. That's a major 7th chord. 1, 7, 3, 5. That's a major 7 E chord, E major 7. Anyway, it's just a beautiful sound. It's that dissonance. You'll learn to appreciate the dissonance a lot, because what you're going to realize as you grow in music is the dissonance is where all the feelings are at. If you take out all the dissonance, it just feels empty and fake. It's just like a movie without a villain. If there was life without any sin in it, I know it's painful to think about because sin and death is painful for us, but if there were no sin and death, it wouldn't be such a beautiful story that God wrote where Jesus Christ reconciles us back to the Father, our Creator. And without sin and death, there would be nothing to overcome. There would be no hero's journey. There would be no hope. We would just be like robots, and it would be like at the beginning of this video when I talked about movement. There would be no movement. We want movement. We want the hero. We want the villain. We want the story. And to have a story, we need that kind of movement. So anyway, minor 7th. That Red Hot Chili Peppers riff, he's playing around with the minor 7 to the 1 there. But again, that's scale degrees. It's not, we got to get to scale degrees because intervals aren't that fun. Scale degrees are fun. So your minor 7th, very rockin'. Sounds like a cool rock song. You don't have a minor 7 when you're in a major key unless you're in a major mode mixolydian, and then you'll have your So that's your intervals. If it wasn't clear to you already, the seconds and 7th intervals, the 3rd and the 6th and the 4th and the 5th are all inversions, so that a minor 2nd plus a major 7th equals an octave, or a major 2nd plus a minor 7th equals an octave, or a 4th plus a 5th equals a whole octave. And understand the intervals are distance between any 2 notes. So there is no key involved in intervals. We're not thinking in terms of keys. We're just thinking of the 2 notes and the distance between them. And real quick, I want to go over compound intervals. We covered the naming conventions for 1 octave up into the perfect 8th, but you've undoubtedly heard of 9th chords, 11th chords, 13th chords. And you may be curious as to how they work as well. It's really very simple. So once we got up to an 8th, we started over, right? So that's the 8th. Well, now that we've started over, what do you think 9th is? It's really just the 2. If 8 is really 1, 9 is really 2, right? So we use these when we make chords, and I told you we stack thirds. Well, we already used the 3rd if we stacked the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7, which, like I say, we're going to learn this later. But anyway, so that only leaves the 2, since we used 1, 3, 5, and 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. Now we need the 2 and the 4 and the 6. So 2 is 9. 10 would be 3. Remember, we don't need 10. We already did 3. 11 is 4 and 6 is 13. So that's what you're going to hear, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths. You're not going to hear 15ths. You could technically say that, but you're probably not going to hear that. So anyway, that's compound intervals, just real briefly. You get the idea. It's not complicated. It really isn't. So that's intervals. Now that you have an understanding of how intervals work, let's get to the good stuff. Check out this video to learn about scale degrees.